Hi everybody, welcome to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be tying the orange blob. It's probably one of the most controversial fly patterns in a long time in history. There's been other flies like the Alexandra that was banned. There was another fly called the nailer that was banned. To a certain extent the boobies suffered the same, but they're more accepted nowadays. And let's face it, the blob is an extremely good fish catcher, very simple fly, and I think attitudes have kind of mellowed towards it now, and it's become very much an important part of people's armoury. What prompted me to tie this pattern was two things. In recent weeks, David McPhail published a video on his channel entitled Tying Mr Blobby, and I'll put a link to that video in the comment sections, but it's all about the evolution of this pattern, and I'm with David McPhail on this one, because I seem to remember that I think it was David McPhail mentions Jimmy McBride. He did an article in the angling press at the time, which was the early 90s I suppose, but he also supplied tying materials, and Davey alludes to it, and here's an original packet of craft tie bright dub. I don't know whether you can see it, but that's it. Because at the time when I saw the article, I immediately sent off for a packet of each colour. It's no longer available, but essentially it's a very soft material and very good to work with, but it incorporates angel hair and very fine strands of holographic filaments and what have you, and it lends itself well to tying this style of fly. So if you watch Davy's video, then that will sort of set the scene, I suppose. But there's another element of to this story, and Rob Edmunds in a blog for Falling Mill also picks this up, where another Scottish angler introduces him to a fly pattern that exceeds expectations. When asked what the pattern was called or how to dress the pattern, the guy just replied and said, "Oh, it's just a blob of Fritz." So hence the name was born. So the discrepancy between the two is, or the not discrepancy, because they both run along similar lines. The change is, whereas Jimmy McBride used craft eye bright dub, or a blend that he created, so it was a soft fur to create this bulbous blob of a fly. There was a transition between then and Rob Edmunds receiving the fly, whereby the material changed from the fur to the Fritz. So, you know, I agree with both accounts. Maybe there's an element of timing there, but nevertheless, here we have the blob, and it's very much part of today's fly fishing scene. So I'll put links to both of those in the comment section, and we'll get on with this fly. So what you can see in the hook is an orange blob. Later on in the video I'll explain to you the other colours I use, and when I use them, I suppose. So before I get into tying it, I just want to explain the way I've approached tying this fly. So if I take this out, I'm going to replace this hook with a much larger single salmon iron, and I know it's not blob like, but it'll explain what I'm trying to illustrate. So if you can imagine, for example, that this is the barb, or the shank of your blob hook, and in a similar way, Blob Fritz is very much designed on the same lines as a feather, in that it's got a central core, and we've got fibres coming out left and right, or either side of that core. And if I just tie this hackle in by its tip, and I'm not worried about the waste because I'm only going to illustrate. Oh, go on, I will take it off. That might clean it up. But what I want to illustrate is if I then double this hackle, so just keep it under tension and run my scissors up. What you'll be able to see is that when I'm wrapping, that if I pull these fibers back and then take it slightly forward, continue taking these fibers back each time I wrap the hackle, what you'll see is I'll start to form a body, albeit lighter because it's a hackle, but I am achieving the same thing I want to achieve with my blob Fritz. Now a lot of people tie in the blob Fritz, they tie it in wet, they just wrap it on, but you know it is a fishing fly, and there's no real need not to provide a bit of finesse or take a bit of pride in what you're tying, just because it's a blob. So let me just take that one back there and continue pushing those fibers backwards, and it'll be the last turn there. And if I just come up and take this hackle off, so hopefully in a roundabout way you can see that the way I've approached it is very similar to how we'd put blob Fritz on. So if you can double a hackle or practice doubling a hackle, when it comes to tying the Fritz on, then if you use this method of tying in by the tip and pushing them back, then you'll have a very nice or well tied blob. So that done, hopefully I've got the message over. I'll just take that off, not worried about the way it's coming apart, but we'll get on with the fly anyway. So I'll just put in one of these blob hooks. Like I say, I had these from FlyFish North. It's a size 10, wide gape, barbless, generally because the fish we take on blobs are, pardon me, are fresh stockies, and no doubt you're going to catch a lot of them, so the quicker they can go back with this, the least amount of stress, the better. So, but if you want to tie it on barbed hooks, that's entirely up to you. So what I've got is I've got several strands of a Mirage like Flashabou. You can use what you want, and then I'll just take that all the way down to a point where I'm happy, and then cut off some way, and once again, because I generally fish it, you can see there that it's within within the international rule sizes. So what I'll do now is I'll just take some Fritz, and I've cleaned the ends, and all I'll do is, when I've got it properly, all I'll do is I'll offer up the end, the waste end that I scraped the material off. Okay, and then tie that in and return the tying silk to the hook eye. Okay, so thinking then back to what I said about the hackle, doubling it, what you can see, I pre-prepped this this Fritz and folded it over so that the material is only on one side of the core. So there, yep, like I say, like doubling a hackle. So what I need to do now is, as I wrap, I'll push back and then take another wrap, continue this pushing back, and in between wraps, what I'll do is I'll just make sure that I take the wrap slightly in front of the last wrap. Okay, excuse for the fingers. It's just it does help support the building of the fly. So once again, you can see that the fibers are only appearing on one side, and just bring it along. I think about 8 or 9 wraps. But depending on the hook that you have will depend on how many wraps are required. And I always take it quite close to the eye and finish my last wrap above the eye. Okay, so when it's above the eye, I then force it forward, and you can see that there's a gap appeared, and that gap is where I put my tie-in silk. So I take 2 turns, then underneath, and one of the best tools you can have is this razor blade with a handle on it, and all you need to do is, under tension, be careful you don't take your tie-in silk off, and it's like a hot knife through butter. So all I need to do now is take a couple of turns to start creating my head. Not worried about those flyaway filament that are going over the eye. I'll show you a little trick there, and nearly there. We'll just whip finish on that then. Okay. So before I varnish, let me check. Yeah, there are no fibres. If there are any flyaway fibres or fibres caught, use a cigarette lighter and just flash the flame across the eye. So what we can do now is we can just check the fly for symmetry, and go ahead and varnish the head. So and I'll put another layer of varnish on that at a little later. Wait for that one to soak in. So there we have it. That's the orange blob. Very easy to tie, quick to grow, and a very successful pattern. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, I'd explain how I use these. So usually early season with fresh stock fish, orange is a go-to colour, but very quickly the fish wise up to these bright orange things, and they start becoming quite shy unless there's other fresh stock being introduced. So the one thing that when I start getting takes or pulls or tugs is I then change to sunburst. Okay, so it's the same style of fly, slightly different, and in addition to taking some of these fresh stockies. As the season grows on or goes on, the water starts to get this algal bloom in it. You can see these green blobs of algae. In bright sunlight, green algae, the sunburst blob is a go-to pattern as far as I'm concerned. So that's just one. The next colour on the agenda would be coral, because as the weather changes, the algae bloom, then you get Daphnia, and coral has been known as a very good Daphnia representation. So depending on I suppose the time of year, so from June, July, once the water has warmed up, Daphnia start to bloom. You can start using colours like coral, and once coral becomes a known colour, a good alternative is biscuit. Okay, so those are probably the four main colours I use: orange, sunburst, coral and biscuit. As to the depth and as to the retrieve, well, depth depends on where the fish are feeding in the water column. Bright sunlight, they're probably deeper. Overcast, they're probably higher, so that'll dictate the line. And speed of retrieve, well, that's experimentation on the day. Sometimes you just can't pull them fast enough. Other times they just want a static, and they'll just swim past and hover them up. So all in all, a versatile pattern, very successful. Competition anglers wouldn't be without them. Make sure you check out the links in the comments, because it is worthwhile, and it's worthwhile expanding your understanding of the fly and where it originated. But other than that, hopefully you've enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.